This review has been a long time coming, and that's because the New Balance 442 Elite that I have here has been out for about a year now. And I didn't rush to do a review of them initially because I had already talked about the original New Balance 442 V2 Pro at length. And the original 442s that I have here are a great pair of boots that I recommend often, especially for those who have wider feet. So the question is, who, if anyone, should actually consider getting the newer 442 Elites? Well, they are going to be $30 more than the regular 442s, coming in at $160, and they do have some notable design changes that are worth pointing out. So in this video, we're going to go over what those changes are and hopefully give you a good idea of whether or not these are going to be a good option for you. And of course, at the end of the video, if you're interested in these or any of the other boots we discussed, you can find links to them on sale with discounts in the description below. So without further ado, let's get into it. So when it comes to the design, the first thing that's going to jump out at you as far as a major difference is that this is the first 442 model from New Balance that is going to have a continuous one-piece upper with this knit elasticated collar running through the center of the boots. This is a design touch that's a little bit more modern, and we do see this one-piece upper design on most other leading boots from the likes of Nike, Adidas, and Puma. And of course, we also see a similar knitted collar on other New Balance models like the Furon as well as the Tequila. And the knit material here on the 442 Elites does feel good. It has a nice thickness to it, and it also has a nice stretch. Now, of course, the other big difference between this 442 model and previous versions is that you are no longer going to be getting a leather upper here. Instead, you have a new microfiber synthetic. Now, while I was pretty skeptical about the change from leather to synthetic here, I do have to admit this is a pretty good synthetic upper. It is extremely soft to the touch, it's pretty thin, and it also has a light amount of padding to it. For those who have seen or played in the Tiempo Legend 10 from Nike, the upper is pretty similar to the fly touch material you get in those Nikes. It does a pretty decent job at replicating the feel of leather, although you will notice some subtle differences. Now, moving back towards the heel area of these boots, you have what I think is one of maybe the best improvements with this new Elite model, and that's going to be the addition of some nice heel padding at the back of the boots. Now, one of my biggest complaints with the standard 442, which I think is a great pair of boots, is that you have pretty much no padding whatsoever at the back of the boots. And although I do really enjoy playing in these, I did notice in the first 2 or 3 weeks when I got them, I did get a few heel blisters towards the back of my foot, whereas with these, I don't think that's going to be as big of a problem, and I certainly didn't notice any heel irritation in my first session wearing these. Now, moving over to the sole plate, there's nothing new or game-changing to report here. You're going to have pretty much the same nylon outsole that we've seen in previous versions of the 442, just with these 11 short to medium length conical studs. Now, the thing I like about this sole plate is it is pretty versatile and not too aggressive, so it's going to be good to use on both firm ground natural grass as well as artificial grass. All right, next up, let's get into the fit. Now, with the addition of this one-piece upper and elasticated collar, you are definitely going to get a little bit more of a modern feel from these boots, and you do get that smooth, connected feel that a one-piece upper gets you, although it is going to come at the cost of losing just a little bit of adjustability that you would normally get from a more traditional lacing system like on the original 442s. Now, when it comes to width, since these are a New Balance boot, you are going to get some options. Now, the pair I have here is going to be the standard width variation, but they also come in a wide version that you can find online for the same price. Now, if you do want to get that wide version, you're going to get a little bit more space across the toe box. You can see here in the standard variation, I do have the wide version that offers just a little bit more volume and width across the front of the boots, but to be honest, even the standard version of the 442s is going to fit wider than most other competitors. It's going to be a little bit wider than the Tiempos, and I think a little bit wider than the Copa Pures from Adidas. So in my opinion, for most people, I think the standard variation is going to be good, but if you do have particularly wide feet, especially towards the toe box, I would recommend checking out that wide version. Now, in terms of length and sizing, I got these in my typical 10.5 US that I go with for pretty much every pair of boots, and I found the length was perfect here, so if you do go out and get a pair, I'd recommend going true to size. Now, in terms of the fit, and particularly differences in the new synthetic material, I did find it to be really soft and comfortable on feet. Maybe a few small differences I'll note, especially just when generally comparing leather football boots to synthetic models, is that I do think you have slightly less breathability on synthetic models compared to their leather counterparts, especially towards that toe box area. And I really think this is only going to come into play on very hot days. I think that you'll get a little bit more circulation on that traditional leather variation. I think leather is more naturally porous and it just gives you a slightly cooler feeling on feet. However, synthetic boots like the 442 Elites do have some advantages over natural leather. For example, water resistance. These aren't going to soak up water like my standard 442s would. So they're going to be a little bit better for those rainy days. And then one thing that's a double-edged sword is that when it comes to synthetic models, the fit that you have straight out of the box is going to remain pretty consistent throughout the entire duration that you wear the football boots. Whereas with a traditional leather boot like the standard 442s, you are going to get a pretty noticeable amount of spread throughout the toe box, and the boots will form to your feet over time. That will mean that they'll stretch out a decent amount. Some players are going to like that if they want maybe a slightly looser fit like I do. Some players may not like that because if you get the boots true to size to begin with, you may end up with too much space after 2 or 3 months of playing in the boots. So it really is a double-edged sword. It just comes down to whether or not you want a boot that stretches over time, or if you want one that's going to stay the same shape throughout the duration of you playing in them. But continuing on with the playability, the touch on the ball in these was really crisp. I felt the thickness of the upper was perfect, not too thick and not too thin. You also have great lockdown in the ankle and heel area. This has pretty much been a consistent feature of all New Balance boots that I've tried. The lockdown is really solid. And as I mentioned, the addition of that padding in the heel area has been great. I didn't notice any irritation whatsoever. And I was on natural grass when I tested these out, and I thought the traction I got from the sole plate was great. Now, when it comes to value, I think this is going to be one of the slightly weaker areas for the 442 Elites. And that's because they are going to come in at an increased $160 price tag, and that does put them in the upper mid-range category of the current football boot market. And of course, notably, it is going to be $30 more than the standard 442 V2 Pro. Now, I wouldn't go as far to say that $160 is overpriced for this pair of football boots, but there are just so many other options that you can get around that price point and below that price point. The only saving grace with the price tags that since they've been out for a little while now, you can often find them on sale for closer to $120. Now, in terms of relevant competition, there are a few other models that I think are worth pointing out. The first being the Tiempo Legend 10 Pro from Nike, which is going to retail for a very similar $155. Now, the Legend 10 Pro is another model that has a synthetic leather upper that's really soft to the touch, and it also has a nice elasticated tongue that runs through the center of the boots. I actually am a pretty big fan of the Legend 10 Pro from Nike. It's pretty much as good as the Elite version, and it has a reasonable price tag. I would say in terms of similarities with the 442, they're so close in terms of fit, but I would say the 442 Elites are going to be a little bit better for those with wider feet who want more volume in the toe box, and the Tiempo Legend 10s are going to be better for those with average shape to slightly narrower shaped feet. Now, another slightly higher end comparison would be the Mizuno Morelia Neo 4 Beta Elite, which does have a full retail price of $180, so it is just a little bit more expensive than the New Balances. But for that extra money, you are going to be getting soft, real leather in the toe box, a slightly more premium synthetic material throughout the rest of the midfoot, and then just generally better build quality throughout the entire boots. And for those who want it, the Mizunos also have a more rigid and aggressive sole plate for those who want a little bit more snap. And then of course, the final key comparison I wanted to call out would be between the newer 442 Elite and the standard 442 V2 Pro. Now, in my personal opinion, I do think the 442 V2 Pro has some advantages over the Elite model. Firstly, I actually do like having a more traditional lacing system because I think it gives me more adjustability. I can keep the boots a little bit more loose towards the midfoot and then make them a bit tighter towards the ankle. You don't really have that same ability with the Elite model. And then in addition to that, I do like the fact that with the standard version, you do have that leather in the toe box that's going to mold to your feet over time. However, to give credit to the new Elites, you are going to get, like I said, a more comfortable heel area, which definitely does make a noticeable difference on feet. And then also, I do think that although these are newer and obviously look better right now than my older pair, these will stand up probably a little bit better to the elements over time. As you can see, because these leather boots have been in the rain and in the sun so often, that leather is starting to crack and get a little bit more rigid at the front of the boots. This synthetic material may just stand up a little bit better against the elements. But considering the OG 442s are going to be $30 less and made with real leather, I think at least at the moment they are slightly better value than the Elites. So final thoughts on the 442 Elites. I think these are a great pair of boots that are worth getting if they are on sale. I think $160 for these is quite a lot of money. I'd wait for them to drop below $130. I think in that $100 to $120 price range, these are going to be great value, and I think they'd fit a lot of people really well, and they're a lot of fun to play in. Especially if you're a player who's interested in the Nike Tiempo or the Adidas Copa Pure, but you've just found that your feet are a little bit too wide for those models, this is probably going to be a little bit more accommodating for you. But then of course, if you want this but in a leather package, I would still look at getting the 442 V2 Pro, which you can still find on sale. And guys, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.